A real-time dynamic feedback system of stroke prevention, TSI-Stroke Part 1 No. 1644, May 16, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, Category, Stroke Risk. Special note, this research journal is based on my personal research using data from my own body and is provided for educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice and should not be interpreted as guidance from medical professionals. Preface. After my hemorrhagic stroke on June 21, 2025, I gradually realized that my TSI stroke model had evolved into something far beyond a mathematical equation. Through repetitive daily observation, it slowly became an internalized dynamic sensing system inside my brain. At present, I use the TSI stroke model at least 20 times per day every time my glucose rises slightly above normal. I immediately pay closer attention to my systolic blood pressure SBP and pulse pressure SBPD. BP. I often perform breathing exercises to suppress my SBP in order to maintain my TSI stroke risk value below approximately 9.5. This feedback process repeats continuously throughout the day. Over time, my brain gradually developed a direct instinct regarding the sensitivity and interaction among glucose, systolic blood pressure SBP, and pulse pressure PP. I can almost visualize the curve dynamically moving up and down inside my mind. At the same time, my brain develops a kind of graphic image of glucose gradually damaging my blood vessels, reduced vascular elasticity, and the SBP pulse repeatedly striking inside my brain. TSI stroke equation. The TSI stroke model is based on a multiplicative interaction structure. TSI stroke risk equals glucose 120 SBP dBP 45 SBP 120 amplifier. This TSI equation is extremely sensitive because the triple multiplicative operations amplify interaction effects rapidly. A small increase in one variable may appear insignificant alone, but when combined with simultaneous increases in other variables, the overall system stress may rise disproportionate. I intentionally designed the TSI using multiplication to amplify its early warning power and sensitivity to combined risk factors. For example, a mild glucose increase combined with elevated SBP and increased pulse pressure may rapidly shift the entire system into a much higher vascular stress condition. Therefore, I monitor all three variables together continuously rather than independently. Glucose versus blood pressure. Through my own research, I gradually came to understand that glucose behaves more like a long-term structural damage process, similar to heavy trucks passing through a bridge every day, gradually weakening the structure over time through repetitive loading and accumulated fatigue. Excessive glucose slowly damages blood vessels, nerves, kidneys, eyes, and brain tissue over many years. Pulse pressure PP equals SBP dBP indicates the degree of blood vessel stiffness caused by both aging and long-term glucose damage. In many ways, pulse pressure reflects reduced vascular elasticity and the gradual hardening of blood vessels over time. Meanwhile, systolic blood pressure SBP behaves like a hammer, acting more like a dynamic mechanical loading force on already weakened blood vessels. SBP fluctuations can occur rapidly within short periods of time, like minutes. As a result, my brain subconsciously monitors both SBP and PP continuously throughout the day, while glucose fluctuations remain behind the curtain like a silent killer, slowly damaging the vascular system over many years. Glucose behaves relatively slowly and remains comparatively stable. In my case, glucose is generally below 110 mg DL and often below 100 mg DL. However, after my stroke, the baseline increased approximately 10% overall. I believe this increase is related to the additional energy demand required for neuroplasticity and brain recovery after the stroke. Even small glucose fluctuations of only 1% to 2% can still create noticeable sensitivity inside the TSI system due to the multiplicative interaction structure. Blood pressure behaves very differently. SBP and PP may fluctuate rapidly with high-frequency waveform-like behavior. Therefore, beginning 41 days after my stroke on June 21, 2025, starting from the 2nd of August 2025, I began performing 20 to 24 repeated blood pressure measurements throughout the day in order to capture these transient dynamic changes. Every time I enter a new BP value, the moving daily average immediately updates and reflects the newest system condition with TSI stroke values. Real-time dynamic feedback. Over time, this repeated monitoring process gradually transformed from simple observation into real-time feedback control. After continuously watching, thinking about, and studying these 144 daily data points, 96 glucose values plus 24 SBP and PP measurements over the past 287 days, from the 2nd of August 2025 through May 15, 2026. The total dataset accumulated to approximately 41,328 data points. It is therefore not surprising that these dense longitudinal datasets gradually transformed into a kind of continuous movie-like dynamic image inside my brain. Rather than isolated numerical snapshots, over time, my brain no longer viewed glucose, SBP, and pulse pressure as separate labrador numbers. Instead, it gradually began recognizing their trajectory, movement, curvature, acceleration, fluctuation patterns, instability regions, and threshold transition behavior almost visually and instinctively. In many ways, this resembles the pattern recognition learning process used in artificial intelligence systems. However, unlike AI systems, my brain is simultaneously observing the data, physically living inside the biomedical system, sensing the physiological changes, emotionally experiencing the survival pressure, and reacting to the feedback in real time. Very few physicians or researchers would ever experience this type of dense, repetitive, longitudinal physiological learning process personally. The TSI-Stroke model now functions much more like a closed-loop dynamic control system rather than a static medical equation. The process often behaves as follows: slightly elevated glucose, increased vigilance, breathing adjustment, SBP suppression, TSI reduction perceived, stabilization, a peaceful mind. This entire sequence may occur repeatedly throughout the day. After enough repeated exposure, the equation itself gradually became internalized as a multidimensional spatial trajectory recognition system inside my brain. This is part of my topological view of health and medicine in real life, where the most important information lies not only in isolated numerical values, but also in the geometric shape, moving direction, data connectivity, and dynamic evolution of physiological trajectories over time. It truly feels as though my brain can see the multidimensional geometry and topological structural changes of the biomedical system evolving over time. In many ways, this resembles how experienced pilots, race car drivers, musicians, athletes, or structural engineers gradually develop instinctive sensitivity toward dynamic system behavior, long before visible failure occurs. After years of repeated observation, the human brain begins recognizing slope changes, trajectory direction, velocity, acceleration, curvature, stability regions, and threshold transition behavior almost automatically. This is probably why I now react almost instinctively whenever glucose blood pressure begins drifting upward. This is part 1.